Greetings all. This is Felisa Meyer, and I'm going to be presenting to you today on Anselm, Abelard, and Salvation, Breaking New Ground. And this is my class presentation for RELT 520, Church History. I'm going to begin by talking about the ransom theory. This is the prevailing theory of atonement in the West during the time of Anselm and Abelard, who lived and worked in the 11th and 12th centuries. The ransom theory has presumably been a part of Christian theology from its beginnings, as it is present in the earliest records we have of the Church Fathers and their theological writings. This theory was laid out most clearly by Pope Gregory the Great in approximately 600. The basic contentions are that the death of Jesus on the cross provides a bait for Satan. When Satan takes the bait, then God frees humanity from Satan, who has held humanity captive. One other view of the ransom theory also suggests that God offers Jesus as ransom to Satan, and Satan takes this ransom, not realizing that Jesus cannot be kept in hell. Essentially, God barters with Satan for humanity through the death of Jesus. We are going to discuss two challengers to this prevailing theory. Our first challenger is Saint Anselm. He was born in 1033 in Italy. He became a monk at the age of 27 after studying with the Benedictine monks since childhood. He became the Archbishop of Canterbury, the head clergy person for all of England. Anselm did not want to take this position, but was forced into doing so because of his monastic vows of obedience. Anselm was exiled from this post twice because he resisted the perceived interference of secular and state rulers in church affairs. Anselm's objections to the ransom theory suggest that he considers it to be an insult to God, as well as to who and what God is. Anselm contends that God does not need to deceive Satan because God is not accountable to or obligated to Satan. Additionally, God is powerful enough that Satan could not keep God from God's people. Instead, God would simply rescue them. Ultimately, Anselm argues that God and Satan are not equals, and the problem with the ransom theory is that it places them on the same level. Anselm wrote a book called Cur Deus Homo, or Why God Became Man. And it is in this book that Anselm attempts to prove the doctrine of the Incarnation from the need for salvation and its provision by Jesus Christ. And it is here where he develops his theory of the atonement. It is through this kind of rigorous theological exploration that Anselm hopes to explicate the truths of Christianity in both new and orthodox ways. Anselm provides his own explanation of his goal in theological exploration. He, quote, endeavors believingly to understand and understandingly to believe. Anselm's theory is known as the satisfaction theory because of his analogy to a vassal providing satisfaction to a lord when a contract was not honored. This was a common practice in that day, and so arguably something that people could both relate to and was a favored analogy of Anselm's. The atonement theory contends that sin and our disobedience therein makes humankind indebted to God. God's justice demands that the debt be paid, or that satisfaction be received. But it is far too great for any human to pay without suffering the consequences of hell. Thus, this payment can only be made by Jesus, who satisfies the requirement of being both God and able to make the payment, and man, that those who need to make payment. Therefore, the birth, incarnation, and death on the cross equaling salvation of Jesus is necessary. The implications of this theory are many, but to outline a few, as well as a few concerns, atonement theory creates the transaction of salvation between God and humankind, instead of between God and Satan. God deals directly with humankind, making the salvific relationship more meaningful. Humankind ceases to be the proverbial damsel in distress, but instead participates in the experience of salvation by accepting the payment of our debt through our participation in the repentance, faith, and sacraments that God has provided. The atonement theory also explains why Jesus must be both fully human and fully divine in a rational way. It is only through both of these qualifications that Jesus can and must satisfy our debt to God. One of the concerns is that this view may reduce the influence of God's love and be too legalistic, making humanity merely pawns in a conflict of the ages, or setting God up as an unbending ruler who must be satisfied. The second challenger to the ransom theory, and also then to the satisfaction theory, is Peter Abelard. He was born in 1079 in France. We know a lot about him because he wrote an autobiography, My Story of Misfortunes, which was rather uncommon in his day. Abelard was a teacher and a scholar in Paris, and he eventually became a monk. Students came from all over to study with him, and it is through this that he is credited with aiding the establishment of the University of Paris by offering stimulating lectures and meaningful theological engagement. He is perhaps best known for his tragic love affair with his student, Heloise. Abelard was known for being fearless in challenging even traditional beliefs that he found lacking in logic or rationality. Abelard's objections to both the ransom and satisfaction theories is that they neglect humanity's role in salvation. Abelard contends that God does not need compensation for the sin of humanity. The image of God portrayed is another concern, because God is one of a ruler, concerned only with God's own honor and justice, not with humankind. Finally, Abelard contends that atonement does not literally take place in the death of Christ. Instead, Abelard puts forth that humanity is in need of a new motivation for action in the world, not satisfaction provided to God. Jesus' death on the cross is evidence of God's love and the demonstration of the merit Jesus gained through his obedience to God. Thus, the impact of the cross is on humanity instead of God. Abelard puts forth that it is humanity that is moved by this gesture of sacrifice. In addition, Abelard states that God never went anywhere. He has not abandoned us. Instead, God already loves us, and it is we that need to come into the knowledge of this truth of the sacrifice of the cross. Ultimately, the cross is where God demonstrates God's great love, and we are transformed, now acting out of love and not fear, because we are so moved by God's demonstration of love. As with Anselm's theory, there are numerous implications from Abelard's theory. To go over a few of them, Abelard's theory contends that salvation has no transaction, but is instead a demonstration of love that we all can embrace, and that we will be moved by, according to Abelard. As Olson adeptly points out in our reading, the real atonement takes place within us, not on the cross. Our repentance and right action are what reconcile us. But God did not need to be reconciled to us, but rather us to God. This happens when we are moved by the story of the cross and thereby experience a moral change within ourselves. This very supposition is the source of the common name for Abelard's theory. In closing, I would like to briefly discuss the legacies of Anselm and Abelard. Anselm's satisfaction theory was foundational to all medieval theologians who followed him. Satisfaction theory essentially replaced the ransom theory in Roman Catholicism. Also, Anselm's argument remains relevant and utilized within conservative Christian theology in the West, even today. Abelard's moral influence theory, along with Anselm's satisfaction theory, foreshadows the concerns of scholasticism, with their focus on the rationality of Christian belief and desire to demonstrate its compatibility with the best of philosophy. Moral influence theory has also been hailed by many modern liberal Christians as revolutionary. Ultimately, both theories are complementary. They seem to be missing what the other one has to offer. This challenges each Christian to re-examine his or her view and understanding of God. In closing, I would briefly like to address the discussion questions that I have posed. The first is, if you had to argue against one of the theories, what would your argument be? This seems particularly significant to me because Abelard argued against Anselm, and other theologians of Abelard's day argued against him. And so it seems like a significant way to look at the work that both of them produced. The second question is, which theory, satisfaction or moral influence, speaks most to your personal, spiritual, moral, or philosophical sensibilities? Why does the other not appeal to you? And I realize that there are some of us in this class who may not be Christians, may not have come from a Christian background. At the same time, it seems like when we read something like this, we do have an emotional response. And so there may be one that you are drawn to more than the other. And so I just encourage you to explore the why of that and talk about why the other one might not appeal to you. Lastly, I wanted to explore together why do you suspect Abelard, but not Anselm, was charged with heresy. I found it so interesting that one theologian was a saint and very embraced by the establishment, and the other was not. So I thank you for your time and look forward to reading your responses. Thank you.